Welcome to Beyond Podcast. Oh, hang on. All right, there we go. Welcome to Beyond Podcast. I'm your host, Anthony Petrellis, and we are so excited to be kicking off our Assistant Coaches Month. We did this last year, one of my favorite months of the year. Assistant coaches are behind the scenes, the hardest workers on the staff. They're nonstop watching film, at practice, running positional things, really getting the, offense or defense ready, whatever side of the ball they're working on. And it's just awesome to see. I was an assistant coach for a long time and I understand the grind that goes into it. So, whenever we can honor assistant coaches on this show, we gladly will, because they are the workforce behind any good coaching staff for sure. And what a person to start off with, somebody that I actually know personally, which is really cool. When I saw the letter of recommendation come in, has been the O-line, D-line coach at Wilmington High School for the last 5 years, was a 4-year starter at Framingham State, was part of a rebuild. And you're going to hear me say that a lot throughout the podcast because this guest is pretty special. I would say, a specialty when it comes to that area. And also was part of a big rebuild, a 3-year starter at Alton Catholic, where I actually met this guest a long time ago and was one heck of a football player there. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, from Wilmington High School, Bobby Donoghue.
Hi, Anthony. Thank you for having me on. I'm really looking forward to it. I've listened and watched many of these podcasts, and it's a pleasure to be on. Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, man, listen, you earned it. The letter that came in for you from your head coach, Craig, he was a former guest on this show, was just outstanding. And knowing the type of person you are, it all made sense. So it was great. So, I'm going to hype you up here a little bit. I like to call this segment a little bit, street cred for my coaches that, kind of walk the walk and talk the talk and do it both and have done it both. I mentioned that AC, you were your junior and senior year, that's really when the program kind of turned around, which led to a long run after that of pretty successful teams. And you were part of that culture building, being a starter as a sophomore, but your upper class years really helped take that program to become to that next level. And then the same thing at Framingham State, you kind of did the same thing. You joined the program, you went over with actual, ironic enough, the offensive coordinator at Alton Catholic. You guys basically went over the Framingham together, and first years you guys were 5-5, but your junior and senior year, again, 9-1 your junior year, 7-4 your senior year, including a Division III playoff game with that. So that's an accumulative of 26-15. So being a part of rebuild seems to be something that is your specialty. So, you joined the Wilmington staff year one. That was Craig's first year. He just got hired. You got interviewed. You went in. Was that part of the mentality for you as going into a program that it was an opportunity to start fresh? That's something you're very comfortable with and were able to jump into?
Yeah, absolutely. It was exciting to be, kind of start from, ground zero. I had never coached at the high school level at that time. So I was learning on the fly, but it was cool to start over a program that, had been struggling a little bit. And I live in town, so I follow them, and a lot of my buddies played for Wilmington High. So it was an awesome opportunity to, dig in, start kind of at the bottom and see where we could take it.
Yeah, and I know you and I had a few discussions about everything after the fact, and that was something I know that was a big part of your decision making, and obviously you kind of weighed out every option, which was great to see. Enjoying the great coach and Craig Turner, who had a lot of success at that point at Mystic Valley, but he came over here, and he was part of the reason why you were selected to be on the show. He had reached out to me fairly quick after us putting out a little bit of what we wanted to do for this month. And he wrote you a letter of recommendation. I'm just going to kind of read a little part of it. And, I'm just going to ask you what your thoughts are here and what Craig, and I know you haven't necessarily seen this, so this is kind of something that's new to you. But Bobby is a tireless worker and learner. Over the course of the last 5 years as our offensive line coach at Wilmington High School, Bobby has gone above and beyond what is asked of him to get better every year. He was without a doubt the best hire I've made at Wilmington. The relationship he cultivates with his players is second to none, and these relationships result in excellent effort from kids because they love and respect him so much and don't want to let him down. I mean, I know Craig's an O-line guy like you are. And so hiring an O-line guy to run the O-line, it must have not been easy for him. But for him to say that about you, I mean, just talk about what that means to you.
Yeah, I mean, that's obviously very, very, very nice of him. Um, Kind of unexpected in some aspects, I guess, but just knowing his personality. But no, I'll tell you, Craig has been fantastic. I We kind of had a mutual friend that kind of hooked us up. I said, "Oh, you're leaving Mystic and coming to Wilmington," and the mutual friend said, "Well, actually, Craig is, but I won't be able to do it with work." So he hooked me up with Craig, and from there, it's been an awesome experience. Craig has been an awesome. I mean, to be honest with you, it would be difficult for me to coach for anybody else because what Craig expects from you, but it's a lot at times, but it's also very fair, which I feel like in some other situations I hear of isn't always the case.
Yeah, and I think that that's really important, like obviously assessing who you're with as well, because you obviously want to feel like you're learning. You know the game of football, but obviously you know it from one side. Now jumping into the coaching side, you learn it from a whole different aspect. And, sometimes that can be the shell shock, of, yep, I get the game, but coaching, it's a whole different level. And to me, O-line is the most important coach on your staff. I mean, when I became a head coach, the first positional coach I was looking for was O-line, because, and you're on both sides of the ball. So when you think about it, like O-line, either running the ball or throwing the football, but both of those require the offensive line to understand blitz pickups, to know which way they're blocking, to understand everything. And that's a lot. And knowing it and then educating it could be two completely different things. And that's really difficult in itself. But I understand the importance of O-line, and even on the D-line. I mean, at the end of the day, if you can't stop the run, doesn't matter what you do on defense. So your D line is that, first line of defense. So, talk about maybe some of your core values at that position as far as like educating kids. Is there certain drills that you do every single day, no matter what, because they just need to do it? Or are you kind of like week to week assessing more of what you're going to see type thing?
I mean, I would say at the beginning of the season, it's a lot of the same things, that I know that starting with the first plays we install, moving down the list to what we're going to do in a couple weeks, that these certain fundamentals, are going to keep coming up. So it's important that the kids know these like set in stone. But then, of course, after the first scrimmage, you can reassess sometimes. And like, for example, this year, we put in a new offense, and it was new for me and the kids. So I spent a lot of time on run blocking techniques, and because that we were going to be predominantly run blocking. And then after the first scrimmage, our pass protection was a total disaster. And in years past, I've never really had to focus much on pass protection because it just, for some reason we were okay at it. But that was a good example of like, okay, so for that next couple days before the next scrimmage, we're going to go heavy pass protection drills and stuff like that. So, to start the year, it's pretty much a lot of the same stuff that I know is going to be useful throughout the year. Then I'll start adding things in, as I watch film or watch us play, like I did in the first scrimmage.
What's like what front? I know every O-line coach has a different answer for this, but what front do you see on film that you just like, oh, we are going to eat this front up? Like, is there a certain front that you just love seeing more than others?
Well, I like seeing the 4-2 front, because a lot of times you know where they're going to be. They're in a gap, and you know what they're responsible for. So it's funny because even as a player, I ran the spread in both high school and college. So I was used to seeing a lot of 4-2 fronts, even fronts. And every once in a while, when a team would mix it up with a 5 front, it was a nightmare for me, especially as a center, because now there's a guy head up on me. I don't know which way he's going. Now it's a lot more communication with the people next to you because, is he playing me head up? Is he going to slant to a gap? We kind of need to keep him covered. And not to mention having someone right over your head, makes things a little bit more stressful.
Right.
But definitely when I see a 4-2, I feel much more comfortable. Like, okay, these are the stunts they can do out of it. This is, the potential. But I feel like it's much more manageable for our offensive line.
That's yeah. Usually I hear that like any three, like I hear a lot of three fronts. Like I hear like a three stack, like a 3-3, like O line coaches, like they were like taking candy from a baby. Like that's every O line coach I've ever worked with. When they hear that, that's like their first reaction. So it is funny what different, coaches see as different fronts of like, oh, I can't wait to see this. We're going to eat this up. And, in spread, a forefront can be tough. It can be tough, especially if you're good against the run, where you have that extra guy kind of lurking in the box, depending on what they're doing defensively. So I get you. I totally get you on the forefront for sure. As an O-line coach, like I always love asking these O-line questions just because I've worked with so many that are so different. Where do you stand? Like, let's say you guys have the ball at your 40, right? Where are you standing as the O-line coach? Are you right there in the thick of things, or are you like 30 yards down the field looking at it from a whole different angle?
I usually try to always be behind the guys. If you're straight on, right down the line of scrimmage, it's hard to see what's going on the other side. If you're behind the defense, I feel like, you're looking through a lot more. So I like to go behind them, and that way I can kind of keep an eye on everybody. But, in general, it's hard watching five players at the same time. I mean, I would say that's what a lot of our discussion is in the headset is what happened there? Well, who did that? Who made the mistake? And, I'll say one person, someone else will say another person, and in the booth you'll get another person because it's so hard to keep track of all five guys. But I feel like my best viewpoint is from behind the offensive line.
Yeah, and that's usually what I see too. And some of them were like, and then they don't have headsets on, so you're trying to be like talk to them, and you're yelling like 40 yards down the field because you're so far behind looking at their line. And I love the headset comment because there's nothing worse than when you have like three coaches chirping, all saying different things. That's when you just see me go like this, and like that's when the coaches are like, "Coach, you gotta put your headphones back on." I'm like, "In a minute, because it's just like." Yeah, it can be just too much of a distraction sometimes. I totally get it.
And it's like everybody says a different name or where the pressure came from or something, and it's like almost like, oh well, the hell with it, let's just move on because we're not solving anything.
Oh, and then you watch the film and it's not even remotely close to what like sometimes they said in the booth, and you're like, what? When you like watch it and you just laugh like that. Those are the funny ones when you watch film as a staff after, and you're like, I thought you said that, like.
Yeah, well, it's sorry to cut you off.
No, not at all.
Sometimes we'll be watching and I'll be sitting there thinking like, see, I told you this is where it's coming from. Then other times I'll be sitting there and I'll like put my head down like, ooh, he was right.
Yeah. And it's true though, it is true. But I think that that's like also an education that sometimes as coaches or as head coaches, we should realize too, is that, when you have somebody in the booth or, it's almost like you got to give them more specifics. If you're just asking them to watch a play, you can't be asking them to watch the routes down the field, the blocking scheme, where was the linebacker on the play? Like, it's just, sometimes it's kind of hard. So, I think that that's also an education for coaches to make sure that, specifically they have either the play calling sheet up there or your scenario stuff up there. So they kind of understand what's in your mind a little bit for sure. So, yeah, and sometimes it's on us as head coaches, I think, to really make sure that communication's great. But it is funny. The chatter in there can be really funny. So I totally know what you're saying. Obviously you're a ball of knowledge. Like, you've been a part of rebuild as a high school and college player. So you understand culture and building culture. And I think that's what you really brought to the table so early on top of knowing your stuff, is that, you kind of understand the patience and understand the process, as the 76ers would say. But, that's kind of seems to be your mentality a little bit. But jumping to the coaching side, what would you say was one of the more challenging aspects of taking that knowledge and coaching it?
Well, one of the biggest challenges for me was that I am a spread guy. I had the same offensive coordinator in high school, the same offensive coordinator in college. It was always spread. We were very successful at it. Coach Rosenbaum is one of the best spread coaches around. So not only did I know that well, And when we decided to change things or like add a tight end, for example, like that was a lot for me because I had never
Yeah.
played with tight end. It creates another gap. You're bringing somebody else into the box, you know. I mean, I love using the tight end now, but that was what was difficult for me was one, when I was teaching spread concepts, it was okay, how do I make this make sense to the kids who haven't used the spread concept before? And then once I kind of figured that out, and then we would change things up or add in different packages, it was like, okay, now I need to learn this and then teach it to kids who aren't familiar with it. So I've kind of seen it on both sides of the spectrum.
Yeah, and you're right. Adding in a tight end to a set, even like on the flip side for like a defensive coordinator, it's a nightmare. Like, we played Arlington a few years back, and that was like they loved running C gap, and that was something like B or C gap using that tight end, and that was something on Thanksgiving we just refused to give them. But it's a lot of practice work into really making sure that your end is doing their job, the outside backer. So on the flip side of you having like a difficult time installing, no, as a defensive minded person, it's also like, ugh, you got to prepare for it. So it is funny how that balance itself off, so much.
Yeah,
Uh,
something. Sorry to cut you off, but something else to add in there too is that another adjustment that I had to get used to is in college. Like I said, we were very successful in high school and in college, especially in college, running the spread. So I just assumed like, okay, yeah, we'll run the spread, everything will work. But something that I never really thought of as a coach was, well, in high school you can't pick who every kid in every position, right? So like, our second year we didn't have spread athletes. I had a bigger line, so it's like kind of hard. In college we had you know more leaner, faster, athletic linemen, so it worked. And to me, it's like, oh yeah, the spread's great, it makes sense. But then you come into coach, and it's like, okay, here's your offensive lineman, and you're like looking around, going, oh, I don't know if we're meant for the spread, or like, so that
yeah.
was an adjustment too, to try to make it work with the plays you had.
When it comes to depth on the O line, I mean, obviously your ideal number would be as many as possible, but going into a season, what is your probably realistic goal of like a number of kids that you would have as far as depth goes? Like you got your starting five. What is the ideal number on the bench
That I would feel
that you would
comfortable
hope
putting.
were serviceable, let's say?
I would say 8.
Yeah.
But after 5 years of coaching, I have never once had 8 players ready to go. I mean, I say it to the kids, the younger kids, and I mean this through experience. There's always like everybody needs to be ready to go. I mean, I started a player this year who never played football last year. He's like not the most athletic. He's tiny, but and to be honest with you, I don't think he expected to play as a senior on the line. But that's just kind of how it goes. It's always the next person up. But ideally, it's 8. But I don't know. It never seems to be the case.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I know. I mean, like I was a big defensive back guy, so 6 was always kind of my magic number. Your 4 starters and 2 serviceable guys, and obviously serviceable means you might be limited as far as your coverage goes, but at least you're able to have someone fill the position. So I get it, and like you said, sometimes you're like, I'd have 4, and I'm like, if somebody goes down, I'm not sure who the next person is up. So I totally get it. And that's not an insult maybe to, the kid who is the next person up. You might be down 3 kids, and now you're looking at a kid who might just not be ready physically to go out there and do it either. So that's another aspect of it too.
Well, that's right. And it's not solely about like the player. It's about what I've found, and I've had to really adapt as a line coach, is that you need to be fair to the kids. Like I need to know that there's a potential that this player might get in. Like I need to prepare him. And I've been in that situation a few times where I've looked around and I said, it's nothing about the kids, but it's like, well, I haven't really given that kid enough attention, or I've been playing him at tackle, but we now need him for guard. So it's about having everybody prepared and being fair to the kids too, because you don't want to put them in a situation that's not their fault.
Yeah, and I think that's like as far as like a defensive back growth, like I've always felt like the first time you're going to play a younger guy, or you're considering giving a younger guy reps, like it's always going to be at something that they can't like hurt you or lose confidence, right? So to me, it was always like cover two corner. Like, let's get your reps in there. Let's get your game time experience there. We're not asking you to do much. We're asking you to be tough against the run and to cover the flat and passing, downs. And again, you build up confidence, and then, that kid ends up being able to do more as time goes on and so on. And I'm sure it's like that for the O-line. I'm sure, you guys have inside zone, outside zone are probably the first couple of plays you're working on. So you're looking all about footwork and leverage and what you can run and what you can't run. And are you quick enough to get to this guy, or which guy you might have to double a certain week. So yeah, like I totally get it. And that's so hard for O-line. It's so hard because going back to what I said, it is the most important coach on your staff. So, sometimes if they're extremely limited to what they have, then that means they got to be good and creative in other ways. And sometimes adding that tight end in there is maybe giving you a better edge guy than you might have at that tackle position as well. So, yeah, it's interesting, man. Coaching is just, especially in the football world, it's just people don't realize what goes into it besides just the teaching, like also the understanding of like footwork and yardage, and if your kid can make the block. There's a lot of science to it too that I love talking to people about that understand it. So it is a lot of fun. And then, what one other really cool thing I think is, as far as you being in Wilmington, is like, obviously you grew up in Wilmington. I know you're from Untitled Catholic. I coached you. You were a sophomore when I started there, and I moved up progressively. And your senior year, you guys were a tough team, but you guys kind of like built that culture. And getting to know you, and coaching in Wilmington, you're an educator yourself. Your wife's also the head volleyball coach at Wilmington High School too. So you guys are really like ingrained into, the culture of that school and the program and the town. And, you're a new dad. And so that's really cool. I mean, talk about you and your wife, like working at the high school with the athletes in town, being a presence. I mean, I think that's really fun.
Yeah, it is. It is. I mean, sometimes it's a lot because it's also two fall sports. So,
Right.
it can be a lot. We might be in and out, not see each other much or whatnot for a lot of the fall. But no, it is cool. Like, I was leaving the 99 the other day and I saw someone like, wave to me. It was one of her players, and some of my players would say, "Oh, I saw your wife the other day," or and so it's nice too that we both, are a little bit more involved in the town. We know the kids. Um, you know, I might hear something from Craig about what's going on at the school, and then I'll like something like, "Oh, we can't practice at this time because they're doing this," and I might say to her like, "Oh, can you guys practice?" And then like she wouldn't even know, So it's
Yeah.
good to we can most of the time between the two of us figure out what's going on.
Yeah,
Even
that's
though,
fun, man. That's so fun. And what I thought was cool about it was, I was able to talk to Lauren a little bit when she first got it, and her social media presence I think has been awesome. I noticed the program like kind of really progressing, and they had some bigger wins towards the end of the season. I felt like I saw them winning, and and she took over. And you guys are new parents too, so like you said, balancing two fall schedules is, I mean, I had a hard enough time balancing one. So balancing two is a whole different ball game. But again, I think it also shows that you guys are invested in the town that you live in, and you're invested in the student athletes, and you both were student athletes yourself, and sports has brought you a lot of successes in your life. So it's nice to see that you guys are kind of working in your community. And who knows, I have a son and daughter in Wilmington. Maybe if you guys are still coaching and there. She might play volleyball, he might play football, and there we go.
Yeah, and to be fair, before we get crowned heroes here, our baby was born October 1st, so
Right in the
I took
heart of fall season.
right. Yeah, so the planning wasn't great there, but she had my wife had an interim coach take over, so we haven't had a full fall yet with the baby where we've both had to go from the beginning to the end. So this fall should be interesting.
Yeah, I know, man. Time management is such a key, but as a teacher and I think as a coach, and you realize how important time management is, and you probably learned it so well. So and as hard as it is, I'm sure you two have a pretty good plan going into it, which
I know.
is great. So obviously, like, you guys had a pretty good season this year. I checked you guys out on 2 different occasions. And you had some pretty good athletes on the team. Your QB was a great athlete, some tough runners. And you guys played some really tough teams. I mean, I was there when you played Bill Ricker, and you guys were winning that game at halftime. Bill Ricker was a very good football team, very physical, very big football team. And you guys hung with them for most of the game. So you guys obviously you play a tough schedule, you play a competitive, opponents. The Middlesex League in itself is it's a gauntlet to run. Do you have any players coming back next year? Some kids who have pretty good seasons, or any old linemen that we should keep an eye on, especially me being a big football guy in town. Any old linemen that we should be paying attention to, or D linemen?
Yeah, definitely a couple, and I'm trying to think here. I don't want to forget anybody, but we have he was a sophomore last year, Ali. He started for us all season. He was great. We have Michael Ings, who will be a senior for us at center. He started for quite a bit. He's an example of a player actually I was thinking of earlier of I needed him. He was down with the JVs as a sophomore, and I just pulled him right up and I said, "Hey, I need you. We got to figure this out on the fly." But yeah, and trying to think.
And that's great. I mean, having a kid who does that, it's so valuable, because it's one thing to be able to get a kid to do it, but like confident wise and nerves wise, like it goes through them, and to then jump
Yeah,
up there and be asked to do a lot. It's nice to have guys in the program like that, or just kind of like you said, that next man up, that next person up mentality of really kind of, keeping the ship going in the right way.
right.
So that's great, dude. So obviously, and I'm sure there's other kids too, obviously that you have that are coming back, which is great. But I'm a big football guy, so I always like to watch the O-line. I feel like it's how I watch the game now. From watching so much film, doesn't matter if it's collegiate, pro, high school, like I just watch the line, and I just, like, you can tell instantly what's being ran, pass, run, like it's just automatic.
Yeah.
So it's just I always adore the O-line position here a little bit, for sure. You have aspirations to maybe eventually become a coordinator, take that next step up, or eventually become a head coach, or is what you're doing right now kind of just your focus and you're not really thinking too much about it? I mean, where do you stand as far as where you see your coaching career going?
It's a good question. I think about it quite a bit. Like there's a part of me who, I love, especially at this point in my life with the baby. Like I love having the offensive and defensive lines. Like those are my guys. I don't. Those are my people. We have a good relationship. And we have a good time together. And just having to focus on them and nothing else is nice. But there's definitely a part of me that would like to take it to the next level. I need to learn. I need to learn a little bit more about other positions on the field before I would feel comfortable, moving up. But I'm getting there, and I'm putting a lot of time in to get there. But yeah, eventually I would see myself as a coordinator or a head coach.
Yeah, and I think you said something really important that I think sometimes is harder for younger coaches to see. Everybody sometimes is about title, and sometimes people are about like what looks good on paper, and that's great. But at the end of the day, I think to make that jump into being a coordinator, like I was always defensive back guy. So, your senior year was like where I really kind of started learning about a front seven, and we ran a 3-4, and that was different than what was ran before. So really educating and understanding that was so important. So, I totally understand what you're saying there. But just talk, I guess, to me just a little bit more about, that culture building as far as like your O linemen go, D linemen go. They're your guys. They're, what what you understand. I mean, what is the expectation of when these guys come in ready to go? That they're knowledge wise and strength wise and being in the weight room, and what are some of the aspects that you're looking for in the off season to really create what you have in season?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, you know, I'm all over my guys to get them, in the weight room, and most of them do. And you notice the older they get, the more they tend to commit. With some exceptions, but I expect people. I've had conversations with some players in the past, like, listen, last year you came in a little out of shape. You know it, I know it. Let's not have that happen next year. And they know and they get it. And I always say to them, this is how I felt whenever I played. The better shape you could. The beginning of football camp sucks. It's the worst. It's
Right.
the. I used to. My summer was over at the beginning of August because I dreaded going to football camp. But you know, the better shape you are in coming into camp, all it does is make your life much easier when those long days of out in the sun, playing hit. The better shape you're in, the easier it's going to be. You can come in out of shape, but you're just going to make it harder for yourself.
Yeah, and I ask you that only because, going back to like what you were saying about head coach, I think one of the key components is really being honest. So knowing your position really well and being able to be honest with people is great. And that's like how you said you then begin to learn the next part of it, because it is about title and it is about, if someone gets offered a position, they're sometimes taking it, but are they really ready for it? And so I liked your answer and you saying that. And I liked your answer and you being like, well, I feel like I have other things that I need to learn. It took me a very long time to get to where I was. I was a coordinator for 8 years before I even felt like I was ready. And so, you got to look at those things and say, I might know one thing really well, but what happens when I need to know this or I need to know that? Or if you become a coordinator, like understanding what your QB is seeing and not seeing, or the types of defense
Right.
that are thrown at you. I mean, it's a little bit different when you're now a little bit more responsible for not just the protection or the run responsibility, but now you're responsible for the ball getting down the field too.
Right. And one thing that I would be remiss if I didn't add, because I think this is really important, and which is why working for Craig is so important, is I, I don't I don't feel like complacent just being the offensive line or defensive line coach, because as a staff, we all work together, and I feel comfortable saying to the receivers coach, like, hey, when we run this screen, he's got to get a little bit deeper to give the lineman some more time, and they don't have a problem, saying that to me. So it's not like, my head's in the sand and I'm just focusing on offensive line and defensive line. Like, we all work together and can do it, well, to make the offense go. And the other thing too is with Craig is, yeah, he's the offensive coordinator, but I feel like I have a lot of say in calling plays and listen to, as I would agree most of the other coaches do. So that makes it a lot better. It's not like, okay, I need to become an official coordinator so I can call all the plays. So I'm not just dealing with the O line, So in our situation, it's fantastic because I feel like being the O line, D line coach, I still can do a lot of those other things and have a say and a part in what we do as a team.
Yeah, and I think that that's so important. I mean, I always kind of had Dave Rich as a linebacker coach, so I kind of leaned on him heavily to be like, are we attacking this correctly? Like, am I not thinking this right? Like, what's our guy's ability? So it was nice to have someone who really knew the position that was teaching me a sense of like, yep, schematically on paper, something might look good, but do we have the horses? Are we necessarily capable of getting to the point of attack first? So, you definitely, it's nice when you have, a head coach that lets your coaches coach, but it's also nice when you have other assistant coaches that are like kind of bought in and understand and keep dialogue back to be like, well, why don't we do this? Or why don't we like disguise it like this instead? It's like nice when you know that you're putting in the hard work that you're putting in, that somebody else on their side or their positions kind of doing the same exact thing.
Yeah,
Um,
for sure.
you obviously played. You've had a lot of success in football. You've coached, under a great coach and himself and Craig. Who's the biggest coach that's had like an influence on you? Like, what coach has kind of really always stood out to you as someone that you've learned a lot from, and maybe still have today?
I would say I look at that question two different ways. Like as a man and as a person, I would have to say Coach Clivio at Arlington Catholic, of course, and Coach Tom Kelly at Framingham State. Both just in different ways, but just great leaders of men, and just ultimate respect. And you'd want to carry yourself the way they did. Um, But on the flip side, when you talk about like coaching, I would say Mike DeCenzo. He was my offensive line coach at Arlington Catholic, and for a year at Framingham State. Excuse me. Um, Coach DeCenzo, I try to model my coaching style around his. He was very cool, calm, and collected most of the time, but when he got angry, you knew he was angry,
The
and
mighty D, the mighty D.
yeah, and we weren't living up to his expectations. But I also, another thing that how he treated us, which I always respected, was when we would go off into individual periods, he wouldn't always kill us. He wouldn't run us into the ground. He wouldn't make us smash each other the whole time. It would be more of like, of course we do drills, but it would be like talking and going through things. And his his rule was, I'll take it easy on you over here, but when we go over there to team, you better perform. And I think all the kids respected that. Like, okay, he's gonna we're gonna talk through things and still get something out of this individual session, but he's not gonna kill us. But he expects that when we go to team with everybody else, that we turn it up. And I really respected that as a player because and I try to treat my guys the same way. Like we get our work in during individuals, but we'll talk through things, maybe not smash each other as much. But when you go over there in front of the other kids and the other coaches, you better turn it on.
Yeah, and I mean, let's be real too. He was a start of a really good run of O-line coaches that predecessed him, and I think a lot of that is where there was that success at AC for a long time, specifically on the offensive side of the ball. There was a decent amount of turnover on those lines, especially after you guys left. I mean, it was almost like a whole new invented offensive line of, yeah, there were a couple guys who definitely were serviceable your senior year, but for the most part, the turnover. And I think the O line position is so important. And in that big run of that AC had for 6, 7, 8 years, the O line was the consistency. It was always having a good O line coach who could teach and educate it. So I love the answer. I know him personally. He's a great guy and phenomenal coach. Coached at Merrimack. I mean, he knows his stuff. He's a really good coach.
Yeah, he does.
Um, what would be your advice to young coaches, Bobby? I mean, someone who obviously went through the process, 5 years ago, it seems like forever ago, but in a grand scheme of things, it's not that long ago. I mean, what would be your advice to a coach who's maybe looking to get their feet wet and get into the coaching world and maybe has a few different offers and or a few different shots at a couple different jobs? Should they look for maybe the most?
Well, I mean, if you're in the situation and you have a few offers and the the coaches well, or even the staff. I mean, I think that's been the most fun for me is that I coach with great guys and we spend a lot of time together. And whether we're all in the group text or at practice or handing out equipment, if you can get with a good group of guys who get along and work together and have a good time, that makes a huge difference in my opinion. It makes me never want to leave, because we have a good time and we work hard and we all have the same thing. So if, based on the scenario you just gave, if you have different offers and people personality wise or whatever the case, which I didn't when I got the job in Wilmington, it just happened to work out. But if you're in the situation where you do pick a group of guys who you'd want to work with, because it makes makes winning better and losing better.
Yeah, I think that's tremendous advice. I always I went back to where I knew, I went back to where I coached, where I played, everything else. It was Arlington Catholic. But, I think it's important that you do weigh out a lot of options. And sometimes it's great when the people that you're going to jump on staff with. Sometimes it's not, and sometimes you just jump into a whole new staff that you don't know anybody and you get to come in from day one and earn it like everybody else who's there. It is nice too to kind of earn, your keep and your respect. And obviously Coach Turner has a lot of respect for you. I know a decent amount of his staff came over from Mystic Valley, and you were someone who did it. So for him to have the trust and respect, and obviously the admiration that he has for you, I think just kind of speaks volumes to who you are. And, if you decide to be a coordinator or a head coach, I mean, I know you on a personal level. I think you're more than capable of doing it. And I always say to people, you know more than you think you know, and you can do more than you think you can do. So, before we sign off, we have our last segment here, our fun part, our 2-minute drill. And, I'm going to ask you questions, rapid fire, 2 minutes. 1 or 2 word answers. Again, if you want to explain something, that's fine. You want to throw a red flag and go a little bit more detail, and vice versa. If I want you to explain something a little bit more, I'll throw the red flag and ask you to do the same exact thing. But coaches love this segment. They have a lot of fun with it, so it should be great.
As long as there's no wrestling questions, because I don't know wrestling.
No
But
WWE questions. I knew that, and I made sure I didn't even want to talk about 90s wrestling. I let it go. All right, here we go. So clock is up, and we'll start. Here we go. Toughest place to play in the Middlesex League, an away game?
I would probably say Stoneham. Their field is grass, and by the time, when we see them in our schedule, it has been beat. You're kind of tucked back away. It's kind of dark. There's a field behind where the away team is, so that, sometimes you'll hear heckling back there. So yeah, I would say Stoneham.
Yeah, I could see that. I could totally see that. The grass field, you practice on that turf too, and then all of a sudden, boom, it's just a slower playing field. You're a big O-line guy, so I like asking O-line guys this question. 4th and goal from the 3-yard line. What are you running?
4th and goal from the 3-yard line. Well,
This one always gets coaches.
Yeah, I would say we call it down, but basically block down with the tight end wing and pull your 2 guards, and you can either cut it up in the hole there tight if it's there. If not, you get a chance to bounce it outside. But off the top of my head, that would probably be the go-to.
All right, I love it. I love it. Best football player you ever played with yourself at any level? At any level?
Probably John Jean Louis from Arlington Catholic. He went out to play at UConn. He was a specimen and could play any position, and was someone that you looked up to.
Yeah, I mean, when people ask me who's the best football player you've seen at Alton Catholic, I don't even hesitate and say his name. He was just different, and there'll be no one ever like him again. He was just unbelievable. Unbelievable. Song that still gets you kind of juiced up before a big game, or something you might listen to on the car ride from work to the school as you're getting ready for the game?
I'm a big Eminem guy, so I'd have to say "Lose Yourself" or "Till I Collapse." Those usually get me.
I love it. I love it. Eminem, old school. I get it. What is your favorite play in your playbook right now?
I'd probably go back to the same one I'm running the goal line, down, buck sweep, whatever, however you want to call it. But there's nothing better than getting my two guards out there and telling them to find work and having your running back be able to pick, follow a horse and make a
Yeah.
play.
I used to love, like, I used to try to convince linebackers, like, especially inside linebackers, to play guard all the time. Like, play guard. Like, they're the linebackers of the old line. They get pulled, they come downfield, they're tough. Like,
Yeah.
so it's funny you say that, pulling your guards, because defensively, like, I just tell my linebackers, like, just be mean guards, and then you'll be better linebackers for it too. Um, Toughest old lineman you've ever coached?
Uh, that's a tough one. Um, I'd say overall, senior, we just had a Jake Churchello. Um, Quiet. He's going to play at Franklin Pierce, but he's a quiet, hardworking kid. Would never take himself out of the game. And to be honest, there's been a couple times I looked up on the field and his knees are a little wobbly, or he's not fully with it. But he would just keep going out on offense or defense. And yeah, I'd say Jake Churchello.
That's awesome. And last question, being a Wilmington guy myself here, where's the go-to slice of pizza? If you're grabbing a slice of pizza in town, where are you going?
Ooh. Um, my wife wouldn't agree with me here, but I would say AJ's Pizza. I love their pizza. It's like, I feel like it's like a hybrid between a Greek and a real thin Italian, it's my go-to. I do
I've
a
never had a
jalapeno.
slice there before.
Really?
No.
Oh, it's great.
I feel like I always get like bigger meals there, because I feel like they pack their meals like they're huge. Like if I got like a chicken broccoli and ziti to go, it's packed.
Oh
Like
yeah,
it's good.
all homemade. It's good stuff.
All right. Well, I will take your advice on that. So you survived the 2 minute drill, Bobby, and I just want to thank you for coming on and being the coach who's kicking off our assistant coaches month. This is a month for me that I love hosting and having coaches on, and it was great to see what Craig wrote about you. And like I said, knowing you on a personal level and understanding, you as a player, you as a coach, as a person. We've known each other a long time, so it was great to get you on here and to really show people, listeners, that you are a guy who is ready when you're ready, when you want to be ready to make that next step. So it is nice to be able to showcase you a little bit and have you on, and definitely keep an eye on you for sure.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for having me, and I wish you all the success as you move forward. It's a great idea.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it a lot. So till next time, guys. Anthony Petralis, Bobby Donoghue, Wilmington High School.